Hey guys, welcome back to the Prescription to Travel MD podcast. Today's episode is one that absolutely needed to happen because if we're being honest, it's impossible to talk about travel and taking time off and actually enjoying your life without talking about money. So, in my last episode, I touched on the idea that free travel isn't really free. So, yes, points and miles are powerful. They can unlock incredible experiences, many of which I've been fortunate enough to have, but there are still these upfront costs that are associated with it, right? So, there's still real life, there still needs to be a margin, and that's exactly why I'm excited for today's conversation. So, today I'm joined by Dr. Brittne Halford. She's a physician, full time hospitalist, business owner, finance coach for women physicians, and she knows a thing or two about money. She knows firsthand what it feels like to come out of medical school and residency and to be carrying this significant debt, this huge burden that's weighing you down while you're trying to build a life that actually feels good. Because here's the truth. As high income professionals, once you're done with all your schooling and your training, you're bringing a lot of money, right? So it's coming in, but what's left over? Are you paying yourself first? What are you investing in that's paying you back? That's what really counts. And for many of us, there's room for some fine tuning when it comes to how we manage it, myself included. So in this episode, we talk about the real financial side of building a life that includes travel, but how to think about debt and spending and creating space for things that matter, like rest and experiences and that time away that's very much needed. Because creating a life that you love really does require intention. So if you've ever felt like you should, be able to travel more or have more time for yourself, just to do the things that matter, but something just doesn't seem to be adding up, this episode is for you. And I can't wait for you to hear it. So I'm so excited to have you on the show today with us, Dr. Halford. I know a little bit about you because I follow you on Instagram and I've been to some of your YouTube videos. But for those who don't know you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How you got started, your journey into entrepreneurship and financial coaching, the whole shebang.
Well, Courtney, thank you so much for inviting me on the podcast. I'm so excited to be here and learning a lot from you about how to use points and all of the things. So, I am Brittne Halford. I'm born and raised in Flint, Michigan, and work clinically as a hospitalist. My journey to medicine basically started from a very young age. I don't know exactly what happened to me. So I have like this chronic condition. So maybe that's what led me to medicine is I had some interactions with the medical field initially. But from the age of 7, I have documentation that I wanted to be a physician. And from there, that has manifested itself and opened up so many doors. And one of the doors is my student loans. So I had $135,000 in student loan debt when I graduated from medical school. And being the only physician in my family, I felt like this huge charge to not only pay down the debt, but also steward my money well. And after paying off 138,000, there's a little bit of interest. In under 3 years, I started to share that on social media. And people ask, how are you doing this? And from there, entrepreneurship just grew and blossomed into financial coaching. And I help women in healthcare who are, still feel a little lost with their money to find confidence and clarity and a clear plan that helps them through proven systems to eliminate debt, build cash flow, and invest smarter. Because what I found is that oftentimes in medicine, we dedicate so much time to our careers that we forget to really invest in ourselves through understanding our finances. And no one cares more about your money than you. And so, unlike advisors, my coaching helps to build confidence and a clear plan without any commissions, without any confusion, and without any shame. So, I like to have like real talk conversations with women about money so that they can manage their money and steward it well.
Yeah. Well, I just had a conversation with a colleague yesterday and, it changed of shifts. I work in the ER and, he was coming onto the shift and he immediately starts talking about feeling exhausted already from like, medicine. And I'm just like, what year did you finish? And he's like, well, I'm getting ready to take my boards. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, like it's too early for that. And he immediately starts talking about his student loans and how he's trying to figure out how he's going to pay all this stuff off. And, his monthly payment is, upwards of $3,000. And, you know, I was just like, yeah, like the feeling that you get from, leave finishing residency and, now I'm in a position, now I've made it, can be really overshadowed by having that, student loan debt and knowing that, like, you're kind of bound to your career because you have this debt hanging over you. So what you're doing is so important in within our field.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, I think people underestimate how heavy that feels. And I too, when I was choosing a medical school, I didn't really consider how much student loan. I just signed them a dotted line like, okay, this what you're gonna give me, this what I'm gonna take. So, but then on the back end, people have to pay that off for decades sometimes, unless you're doing PSLF, 10 years. But even with doing PSLF, public service loan forgiveness, it also comes with a burden of, for many women physicians, having to work full time, not being able to like craft their schedule the way that they want. It limits their types of employers. And so there are a lot of great benefits, of course, if you have a huge student loan burden to forgiveness, but also it comes with the burden of some restrictions.
Yeah. So how did you do it? How did you pay off all that in 3 years?
Well, for one is you just have to be very clear on what your goal is, For people who are tackling student loans, it is not the debt that's a problem, it's a lack of a clear strategy that's the problem. And once you can reconcile, and I also teach women to give and express gratitude to that debt. Because as a woman growing up in Flint, Michigan, my parents had no money to fund my education. So the debt, that medical school debt, helped me to realize a dream. And once you can express gratitude to it and you understand its purpose, then you can clear up all of the brain fog, clear up the emotional baggage, and start to create a strategy. And so when you're able to do that, I think the first branching point of the strategy is, do I want forgiveness under public service loan forgiveness, or do I want to pay this off? And that sometimes takes some time for you to kind of grapple with what would the payments be under each, strategy. How will it feel for me? Am I willing to do said thing? Am I willing to work for an employer that is eligible for forgiveness? Or am I willing to, eat beans and rice, maybe, so that I can pay this off aggressively? Whatever, you have to choose your hard, right? And so once you can get clear on that decision, then and you clear the emotions, then you can start to craft a strategy. So for me, I was under public service loan forgiveness when I was in residency as making the minimum payments. But at some point in residency, I'm like, you know what? I don't really want to carry this debt. I don't want to submit the paperwork. I don't want to be restricted to this type of employment. So I decided after residency that I would pay off my student loan debt. And I had 135,000 at that time with an interest rate of 6.8%. So I knew that if I could get a lower interest rate, then that would help me to have more of the payment go directly towards the principal and pay it off faster. So at that point, I refinanced my student loans from the federal government to a private bank, and it took the interest rate down from 6.8% to about 3.5%. And I selected a 5-year term. So that almost doubled the payments, honestly. It made the payments about $2,500 a month. And before I refinanced, I first did, my evaluation of what would the payments be, and under my income, made sure that I could pay that, right? I saved that amount. So I kind of did this rehearsal of saving that amount of payments for 3 months. Evaluate, how is this feeling for me? Do I still have cash flow? Can I still do the things that I love, desire, travel, spend time with my husband, invest? And once I was able to do that, then it started to become like a game. Like, okay, well, what if I put a little bit more money towards my student loans? And that's how I paid them off more aggressively than the 5 years, just by allocating additional funds, being very strategic about how I'm spending my money, and focusing on my individual joy. And that's why my company is called More Joy, More Wealth, because really, when you focus on what brings you joy, you will have more wealth.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I'm focusing on having more joy and more wealth and finishing up paying off my own student loans. soon. So I'm hoping by end of this year, actually, I feel like by the end of this conversation, I'm gonna be ready to go out and just knock off like the, few remaining thousands of dollars that I have left over. I'm like, I'm heading to Staples. I'm gonna get myself some gift cards so that way I can call Nelnet and make these payments and, get some points because that brings me joy. So, that's my motivating factor to get my loans paid off for before the end of the year.
Oh my gosh, yes, I've heard about that strategy, and, I have not, of course, used it, because I paid mine off more aggressively before I got into this whole points accumulating phase. I appreciate everyone who can do it, so thank you for sharing that.
And it's something I learned about a lot later. A huge chunk of it had already been paid off, but then once I figured it out, they have the PayPal loop that was open and that they eventually shut down, and then I was, buying gift of college gift cards, and then they had this, random loophole that opened through DoorDash a few months ago and was able to get some more gift of college gift cards, so whenever it happens, I'm like, but I'm determined to get that done.
Yeah, you'll have to share more about the DoorDash, because I'm curious.
Well, I think there's a certain, women's physicians points group that, likes to shut things down, so I feel like as soon as we got a hold of it and started using it, it kinda went away, so, yeah. But there are other options, including, with Nelnet, you can buy gift cards from Staples, so you use your Chasing Business Cash card, which will earn you, like, 5 times back at office supply stores. You go during the fee-free Visa or Mastercard gift card weeks, and you can buy those gift cards. I know, like, Nelnet specifically, but certain loan providers will allow you to make debit card payments over the phone, so it's a very time-consuming process where you have to call and you have to give them each individual number, and when you buy the gift cards from office supply store, they come in, like, $200 increments, so that's a lot of $200 increments for student loans, so you do have to be committed to making this work, but it is an option, and it's a great way to earn points for spend that you're going to have to make anyway, so
Okay. Yeah, I have a nephew who's in college right now, and he will be graduating. So that sounds like a good gift, and my mom could do the calls because I value my time too much to stay on the phone calling people.
Right, right, right. It's one of those things you do when you're, like, doing laundry or you're, like, multitasking, so you're like, "Okay, so I'm getting this done, but there are other things that I could be using, my time for." So, yeah, definitely have to weigh the pros and cons. But one thing that you brought up in the process of talking about paying off loans and paying off your debt is investing, so making sure that you're not just paying off your debt, but you're also contributing towards, paying yourself for your future. I know a lot of people talk about, getting to the end of the road and you paid off your loans, and especially if you've been really aggressive with it and you haven't invested, then you're like, "Okay, what next?" So now instead of having, like, positive net worth, you're at starting from 0, ground 0. So what does that approach look like for you in terms of, paying off debt and accumulating wealth at the same time or for your clients?
Yes. I think this is a great consideration for many people that causes a lot of angst. And there are some numbers that have been thrown out. One is, 6% versus 8% interest rate. So I would say you really want to appraise your debt profile because there are various types of debt, right? Some people have personal loans, some people have car loans, some people have consumer debt with credit cards, some people have mortgages, and then your student loans, of course. So whenever you're creating a debt strategy, I first want you to get acquainted with your debt. Actually know what type of debt you have, what the interest rates are, right? What is the payment amount? And once you do that, then you can make an informed decision. Because if you have consumer debt, if you have credit cards that are 18 to what, 29.99% interest, you should not be investing at this point because there is very little investments that are going to give you that guaranteed return. So when you think about investing when you have consumer debt, I would say that that is an investment in yourself because that is a guaranteed return if you pay off that debt. Okay. So at this point, when I was investing with my student loans, I had no consumer debt. I was making sure that I could pay my credit cards off in full, carrying no balances. I also had no car loans. And so it depends on what type of car loan you have, but sometimes car loans can be 8 to 10%, right? And if you think about the average return of the S&P 500, that is about 7 to 10% annualized. So again, investing has its risk. And if you want to give yourself a guaranteed return on that investment, then I would say make sure that you're paying off that high interest debt first, and then you can start to look towards investing. So when I looked at my debt profile, first I had 6.8% of student loan debt. And even as a resident, made a mistake, but I invested. The mistake was I invested in a 401k because I got no match. I should have used a Roth IRA instead because it provides more flexibility. There's no required minimum distribution. So it is a pathway to leave a legacy of wealth for my children. And at that point, I was making a lower salary. And so I did not reach those income thresholds and could take the front door, do a direct contribution, and take my money out if I needed it for some reason. Instead, now that I have to do the back door and I'm paying a lot more taxes on it. So that was one of the mistakes that I made as a resident. But even as a resident, while paying off my student loan debt, I had invested. And I think the reason why I did that in residency is because I was going for forgiveness. So I wasn't really concerned about the interest accumulation because I was making the lowest possible payment so that I could get the most amount forgiven. And that's why when you're thinking about investing in your student loans, really understanding what that pathway looks like is really important for that first clearing up the emotional baggage, right? So that you could be strategic and not overwhelmed. And then deciding whether you want to pay it off or if you want to go for forgiveness. And if you're choosing to pay it off, really appraising what those interest rates look like so that you can make an informed decision and give yourself a guaranteed return on your investment.
Yeah, and that's something I wish I had known, 15 years ago during my residency, but no one was really talking to us about those type of things. And, I had a similar situation where my parents couldn't afford to send me to college or to med school. I remember getting accepted into college, and I was like, oh, I'm going to go here. And, my parents must have like, money sitting in the bank for me to go to college somewhere, just like they do on like TV, and it came time to pay for college, and it was like, well, you're on your own. And I was like, "Okay," so I was fortunate enough to get scholarships and, I worked a little bit, during the summer months to be able to afford my college education. And, when I got to the end, got to medical school, it was the same thing. It's like, "Okay, well, I'm in. It took a lot to get in here. It didn't matter, like, how much I was gonna owe. I just know I needed to get in, and now I'm here, so whatever it takes to, finish up, I'm gonna sign on that dotted line, and I'm gonna accept that loan payment and know that I can pay it off later." And then you get to later and you're like, "Okay, now what?" And loan forgiveness wasn't something that was, on my radar at the time, so I was just trying to figure out, like, how to get through, and then started working, had credit card debt as well, and so that was the first thing. I met with a financial advisor, again, had no idea what I was doing, so it would've been nice to have your little, voice sitting on my shoulder at the time saying, "Okay, this is the next step, this is what you do." Didn't know anything about a Roth IRA or an IRA, or, I knew a 401k existed, but, it's still like, "What's that?" I'm just, putting my money in and hoping for the best. But met with a financial advisor who gave me this, like, pyramid that said, "Okay, you need to pay off this first." So I just followed the instructions. In the first year as an attending, I paid off all of my credit card debt, any, like, advanced loan payments that, were required for me to move, from one city to the next, paid that off. I swore off credit cards and just, you know, barreled through. And I think at the time, paying off my student loans also was not, like, a big push for me. I knew it was gonna get paid off, but I also, in my mind, figured I'd be paying my student loans off for, like, the next 30 years. So I'm glad it hasn't taken, nearly as long, but I did become a little more financially savvy and started reading more and just finding out all these things that I wish I'd known again 10 years later, but better late than never. So, yeah.
Better late than never. And there's always a time for it. If I had received information about, yeah, investing when I was in college, maybe it would have sparked a plug, but I don't think I would have tuned in. You want to have like in time opportunities and education. And so when we're interfacing with information, maybe it's just not the right time for you to access the information, right? And so, yeah, so give yourself grace, and I don't know if it's a delay per se, because everybody has their own journey and everyone has their own time.
Yeah, for sure. And so what does life look like for you now that your loans are paid off, you're still working, imagine are you working full time as a hospitalist?
I am still working full time. Distribution of my time in medicine looks a little bit different than, a traditional hospitalist because I have some administrative roles as well. But yes, I am still working full time. So it is quite interesting, Courtney, because I'm doing many things. So I'm still working full time. I also am a financial coach for women in healthcare, so I do that. And we recently just purchased and renovated a laundromat. So for the past week, that has been occupying a lot of my time. And my debt profile looks completely different. When I paid off my student loan debt, I'm like, oh, I'm done with debt. I want no more debt. I was very debt averse. But then we had an opportunity to purchase a home. And of course, we live in Boston, and the cost of living in Boston is very expensive. So we didn't purchase that home in cash. We took on debt. And then when we grew out of that home, we purchased another one. So now we have 2 homes in Boston, and, we invest in various accounts, both pre-tax, post-tax, retirement accounts. We have taxable accounts. We invest in oil and gas, and we've recently purchased a laundromat, which we renovated using debt. So my debt profile looks a lot different than what it did before. We are investing in a few assets, and I can say that going through the journey of paying off my student loans really helped me to, one, get very close and intimate with my money. Just like we have relationships with, our partners, we have relationships with our family members, we have relationships with our friends, we also have a relationship with our money. And for some people, you might like, listen, money, just stop calling me. Or for others, it might feel like a warm embrace. And that has helped me to really think about what is my relationship with my money? Where does this fear of debt come from? Where does this giving money all of the control and the power over me come from? And once I realized that money was a tool, once I realized that I could pay down my debt, that I could control it, like my behaviors had lead to various outcomes in my finances, that was like, okay, well, now I can use this to leverage, to build additional time, to build additional streams of wealth for not only myself, but for others. So the mix looks very different now, and I am enjoying kind of riding this way through entrepreneurship. I sold hair products at one point in time, then the financial coaching, and now with the laundromat, and my husband has a private practice. Like, I've learned so much about different types of service options that I can provide and that I could monetize. And so, I'm learning a lot. I'm still doing my thing in medicine. And yeah, the time is very interesting.
I love it. I love it. And I wanna hear more about this laundromat that you purchased. I know, being in the physician entrepreneurship space, you meet a lot of interesting people who've done some really cool things with, what they call boring businesses, which, are can be very lucrative. So, what was your journey into buying a laundromat like?
It's been a roller coaster. So, when we purchased our laundromat, really it started with a vision from my husband, and you mentioned boring businesses. I think Cody Sanchez kind of coined that term of that there are all these businesses, these small businesses that baby boomers are running and they want to exit because they're tired. It's time for their retirement, but they have no pathway to do so. So knowing that and also thinking about the strategic move. Okay, so the financial strategy behind it is we were looking for a laundromat that yeah, a laundromat because the profit margins are like 25 to 35%, depending on how you run the business. So that's a pretty good profit margin. And any additional dollar that we can generate passively by owning a system will help to offset the amount of money that I need to generate through, physician role or other roles. And if we can continue this, if we can optimize that system into our retirement, then that means I have somebody else paying me, and I have to save less now because in retirement, money has a different value. So we expect that we need to save, like 25 times basically the amount of money that we want for retirement. And so if I could save $25 today, or I could generate a dollar in retirement. And that too has kind of this different feel. So with that, the laundromat, it had great margins. It also presented an opportunity for us to leverage some of the changes that were occurring in the tax code under this One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And because we purchased this rundown laundromat that we bought all of this new equipment for, the $400,000 that we paid and for machines, we can deduct that from our W-2 income because I materially participate. Now, physicians have a high tax burden, right? I April 15th, I'm like, "Oh my gosh," every every April 15th. And I have a tax accountant that gives me quarterly estimates, so I know it's coming, but I still feel the impact of it, right? And so for us, we're thinking, "Okay, how can we help to generate wealth, help to decrease our tax burden, and create a system that allows some flexibility for passive income?" And the laundromat was that opportunity. It's been a bit of a roller coaster because I don't have any experience owning a physical business, and neither does my husband. And we, have 2 children. We're doing all of the things. So there is a lot of growth and learning. And anytime you undergo a renovation, I don't know if you've ever undergone a renovation, but there's delay, there's additional cost. You open up a wall, they're like, "Oh, we found this problem." And because this is a business that was operational that we purchased, we closed it down. Now all of our customers have no place to go for their clothes. And having clean clothes is an essential service. Everyone needs clean clothes, right? And so then I also have employees who I could not do this without my employees. And so I also understood the financial impact of us closing down. So we have actually paid our employees during the time that we were closed down for renovations. So it came with a lot of planning, strategic planning, and understanding how it's going to benefit us, but also how it benefits the community. And we recently reopened on Friday, and my 8-year-old, she's like, "Mommy, why does everyone keep saying thank you to us, and that they like our laundromat?" Because it was really run down. And sometimes people have no other options to go to launder their clothes. And so we have helped to elevate the health of the community. And we haven't purchased the books yet, but put books about health and wellness. And I'm even thinking about putting a blood pressure cuff there because a lot of our customers are Black and brown people who we know are more impacted by hypertension and the sequela of hypertension, heart disease, renal disease, all of the things. And so we want to be able to help to elevate, to not only provide them with a resource of cleaning their clothes, but helping them to get a clean bill of health as well.
Yeah. What an impact you're making on your community. That's wonderful. I love to hear it. I think, in the process of finding things that, like, light us up in entrepreneurship, it's important to feel like we're making an impact. I think that matters to at least myself, and I feel like many of my colleagues more than anything. And I think sometimes in the day-to-day, like, in medicine, especially in emergency medicine, I feel like I'm not making as big of an impact individually, so when you can do something that fundamentally changes the lives of people, in such a positive way, I think it's just such a wonderful thing. So, kudos to you for building wealth and for building the wealth of your community, through their health and through finding things that help with their livelihood. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. And thank you for serving in the emergency department. Cause girl, I'm like, when do you go to the bathroom and eat? I think it's so busy.
I was like, yeah, life can be a little challenging." And my husband's a hospitalist, so I share in the frustrations that you face as a hospitalist trying to manage patients and all the things that go into the social aspect of getting patients in and out of the hospital and, so it's nice. I think it's nice when you have another outlet, and you've got many.
Yes, yes, yes. Sometimes I think too many. I'm trying to scale back now and understanding where I can kind of pull back in some regards. So, but purchasing a laundromat, owning a laundromat, I have a lot of content on my YouTube channel about that whole process as well. It's interesting, and I think anyone can do it for sure, but it is not for the weak-hearted, especially if you're going to be renovating the space.
Yeah. Well, I just tapped into that episode, so yes, definitely follow find her YouTube channel. I'll put it in the show notes. Go watch it, and maybe you'll be inspired to open up a laundromat. Every time I have a guest on, I always tell people I'm like inspired to start something new. So next next year when we're talking, I may have opened up a laundromat in addition to paying off my loans. So in the process of doing all these things and being an entrepreneur, I imagine you're amassing a lot of points. Tell me that you're amassing a lot of points.
I am an accumulator, but I haven't cashed in yet, so I'm still learning that that phase.
And that's okay, but you've got the points, and so when things slow down, there's a time and place for everything, then you'll have those points, and you can use that to be able to fund travel for your family and, not have to worry about, cash out of pocket, and so, yeah. But if you're buying new laundromat equipment and, your husband's running a practice, those are great ways to amass a ton of points. I was actually, in my Facebook group, someone commented on one of the tax day posts about, like, well, this actually doesn't apply to those of us who are like W-2. And I'm like, as a W-2 employee, you do definitely have options for getting some of these benefits. But as an entrepreneur, if you have a side gig or, a small business, those are ways that you can earn massive points, as well as tax deductions, which are very important when it comes to saving some of the wealth that you're generating as a position. And if you can do something like running an Airbnb as a short-term rental or a laundromat, then you can offset some of your W-2 income when it comes to tax time.
It is very rewarding to be able to offset the taxes, but it's also very revealing. I think as a high income earner, that piece was not revealed to us, you know? It's like, okay, you're gonna earn this big salary, but then on the back end of it, when you really think about it, I am working a third of the year for free just to pay taxes. Like, oh my gosh. So that's every time I go to work and my kids are crying, "Mommy, don't go to work." A part of that is just to pay taxes. And some people are like, okay, well, just pay the taxes. The taxes are helpful. And I get that. That taxes are helpful for our municipalities, for, a lot of the things that we enjoy. And while that is also true, I think that one of the ways that even when we're saving from a tax perspective, that money is just not going for us to spend frivolously. We donate a lot and we give a lot to the community. So that's kind of my play. I would prefer to have more money in my pocket to do the good that aligns with the values that I really that are have been entrusted in me and that helps to benefit the communities that we serve, opposed to our money sometimes being squandered in ways that don't really align with our core values and our truths. So taxes are huge and not the only driver, right? You don't want taxes to lead every investment decision or every decision, but taxes can, and eliminating taxes or decreasing your taxes can be very lucrative. And speaking about points, so I have accumulated many points. I don't know if I'm accumulating every single benefit that I could. So that's one one area of my personal finances that I would like to optimize a bit, with the Amex Platinum, for example. That's one that I have in my wallet now. They've increased the fees. And so now it's like, okay, well, how do I actually make it worthwhile when I'm not actively using the points? So that's the phase that I am now kind of negotiating of how to maximize this so that I have more points to cash in later and then how to cash them in the most effective ways.
Yes. Well, you're in luck because that's what I do. I do offer strategy services, so we can talk a little bit later. But for anyone else who's interested, I do offer point strategy consultations. So if you're someone who doesn't have a ton of expenses, you want to optimize it, or you're a business who has a bunch of expenses, and again, you're just trying to figure out how to most efficiently, time efficiently, and financially efficiently manage those expenses so that way you're earning the most points, so that way you can use them now if you want, or you can use them later when you do have more time freedom to be able to travel and do some of those things. So if you're interested, certainly reach out. But yeah, if you're running all these businesses, you definitely have some room to grow. So Amex Platinum is in your car or in your wallet. What other cards are you using when you're doing these renovations? And
Personally, I have the Amex Gold, which I really love because I get the 4 times the points for the groceries, which is great. I have the Amex Blue Business, that's the one that I'm using for the laundromat. It gives us 2 times the points just for all everyday expenses, so that's been phenomenal. Outside of Amex, I have a few just regular cashback cards, which are great, and then my husband has Chase Sapphire Reserve. That's actually the first one that got us into points earning is the Chase Sapphire Reserve. But again, having all these cards is annual fees and then also trying to manage to optimize them. So I'm still figuring that out. And then there's one other one that I have in my wallet here that we used for business. It's a Chase. It's kind of like a grayish card. You know which one I'm talking about? I'm pulling it out. Oh, Chase Business Unlimited Inc. That's the one. Yep. Yeah. So that's another one that I have in my wallet.
yep, so all great cards. Yep, your Ink Business Unlimited earned you 1.5 times back on all of your expenses, so that's great. I always recommend having a card that's earning more than 1 time back. The Amex Business Platinum, if you're making purchases over $5,000, that card is gonna give you, 2 times back on those large purchases. So and then the Amex Blue Business no annual fee cards are great because, again, 2 times back on I think it's up to $50,000 a year, for those cards. And then if you're not sure that you're taking advantage of the perks of the Amex Business Platinum card, then you need to be taking another vacation. I think it's, so that card in particular, you can so the fee is like $895 a year, which is a lot, and so I just did an episode where I talked about how, as influencers and people, credit card pushers, as I sometimes call them jokingly, we can sometimes make it seem as if, playing this game is free and we don't really, it's like, okay, well, I just went to Hawaii and I spent 7 days there and I paid $0 out of pocket for my hotel, but I did have to pay, a $695 fee to keep this card. But if you're using the credits to offset that annual fee, then it's not so bad. So the FHR credit on your Amex Business Platinum card will give you $600 every year, $300 each 6 months that you can use for a hotel. And so hotels here in Las Vegas are relatively cheap, so you can stay somewhere really nice for like under $400 and use that credit easily. So it makes for a great date night, and then you go, and then they'll give you $100 back for dinner, and you may get free breakfast the next day. So sometimes you even make out with more money than you started with if you choose the right hotel and on the right date. So if you haven't figured out how to maximize those credits, then it sounds like we need to get you here to Las Vegas because I think New York and Boston and some of those places don't have like hotels that actually fall into that $300-$400 category like you can find here. So maybe you need a trip to Vegas.
Yeah, we will actually be coming to Vegas next year, so that's one thought, but just even the Resi credits and some of the entertainment credits, like, utilizing all of that, we don't do as readily, so, like you said, date nights definitely should cash in on those, and I really like that, our laundromat is structured as a partnership with my husband and I, so our date nights can be business meetings as well and get a business deduction and earn some additional points, so we could double dip in that way as well.
Yeah, and all those things that you have to look forward to if you do decide to open up a business or, start something on the side, so if you, kinda have the bug and you're kind of thinking about it, definitely, again, check out the video about the laundromat. Don't be discouraged if you see all these things and realize and start thinking that these things aren't for you because I think these are options that are available to many of us, and if you're a physician or you're other high income, healthcare professionals, you have the means of creating, this reserve of this financial reserve that you can use to be able to put the down payment down and leverage debt appropriately and create these businesses that could essentially fund your retirement but also fund your fund your travels right now. So Yeah. So with all the work that you're doing, when do you find time to actually travel and, enjoy life a little bit? Because it's a lot of work doing all the things that you're doing. And I think it's very important that we're finding time to rest and to reset. So how does that work for you?
Yes, that is a great question. So, one of the ways that we do is there's always a celebration, whether that's a birthday, anniversary, those are times to optimize, and then family vacations from school. So we try to really be intentional about doing that. I can say that we did not go anywhere for this spring break because it occurred right at the time of us opening up this laundromat, right? And so part of it is a temporary pain for a long-term gain. So we have some vacations planned for October because this past couple of, like, 3 months and probably next month as well will be all about building the business, and we're okay with that, but the travel has been really nice, even with my kids, my daughter, she said something, she's like, "We're gonna be rich." And I said, "Brooke, you're already rich." Like, you don't understand because this is your norm. The fact that my children have passports, the fact that they've gone out of the country, right? We've gone to St. Lucia, we've gone to the Dominican Republic, we've gone to Panama, and every time we go, we're able to stay at nice hotels, be near the beach, do all of these things. That is a luxury, and it is very important for us to do that to maximize not only working hard, but also playing hard and rewarding ourselves. But also, when I'm thinking about this is how do we teach our children to do both and do it responsibly, and I think that that's a whole 'nother conversation, but yes, we've gone on some trips both individually and also, as a family, and my husband and I also like to cash in on the doctor's trips, usually it's a conference for one and a vacation for the other partner. Yeah.
Yeah, and we love optimizing with, like, CME trips, because so my husband, he gets so much vacation time, emergency medicine is a little more flexible in terms of having availability, like, I can schedule my shifts so they're stacked at the beginning, and then I can take some time off later. As a hospitalist, things are a little different, and especially with him, so a lot of hospitalist careers will be, like, 7 days on, 7 days off. Unfortunately, he doesn't have that luxury, so he's on for, like, 12 days in a row, he's off for 2, back for 5, off for 2. So being able to take vacation and to optimize his, like, CME time for vacations is very important to us and something that we make sure that we get good use out of, so
Yes, yes, and you'll have to share your itineraries. I don't know if that's something that you share with your consulting clients, but I'm curious to know all the places that you've gone especially as a family.
yeah. Yeah, and it becomes a little more challenging as the kids get older, but yeah, would love to share some of our itineraries and the trips that I plan in my head that never actually come to fruition, but yeah, I've got lots of ideas. But yeah, it's very important that, again, that you're taking the time off, that you're taking time to reset. And it doesn't always mean that you're going on this lavish vacation or that you have to venture somewhere. Like this weekend, we went to Disneyland for my kids' birthdays, and it was a 4-hour drive to California, and we had a great time. My kids are used to staying in really nice hotels. They I don't think they've ever met a hotel that they didn't love. So we get there and they're like all excited because I have Globalist now. So my daughter's like, "Did we get this suite because you're Globalist?" So now I'm like committed to keeping Globalist because every time we show up, they're just like so impressed and they're like, "Oh, is this because you're Globalist?" And I'm like, "Yeah." It all worked out that way. But I saw something on social media the other day, and it was talking about, like, as kids growing up, spring break meant that you had a break. It didn't mean you were going on vacation. It meant that, "Hey, I get to stay at home," and, you're watching, like, Jerry Springer or whatever it is on TV at the time, and you just got to sleep in. Like, that was break. And summer breaks, we weren't necessarily, like, traveling extensively. Maybe we took a trip to California, and maybe we didn't. But kids our kids really do have a very luxurious life. I don't think they realize that this isn't the norm for everyone, and it definitely wasn't the norm for us growing up, and I think it's taking a step back, just like you mentioned, to appreciate that because it's definitely something that we have a privilege to do, and I don't take that lightly. I'm looking forward to being able to help you with some of the trips that you'll have coming up, but it sounds like you guys have been doing a pretty good job of staying up on things, and I think right now, again, you're in a season of life where it's focusing on building something, And then eventually things will be able to run themselves a little more efficiently, and then you'll have that time and you'll have those points to to be able to book some of those amazing vacations that we often talk about. So
Yes, yes. I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, we'll have to do another follow-up episode after our chat about what we were able to do and how we work together. And Courtney, I just want to say I'm so grateful for you, inviting me on this podcast and being able to share my story with your audience.
yeah, so it was really great having you. I hope that you guys have really benefited from listening to Dr. Halford. She has so much knowledge to share. If you are a woman physician and you are interested in achieving your financial goals and whatever that may be, I encourage you to reach out to her. She's a great resource. And I think that, again, you're if you're listening to this and you're like, "This is a travel podcast, like, why are you talking about your finances?" I think finances are a way to increase your freedom, increase your optionality, so that way, you have those opportunities because let's be honest, like, even with points, you still like, there's still gonna be some cost that comes with wanting to travel. There's the time cost, so if you're tied to your job and you feel like you can't leave and you can't take those time off, you miss out on being able to go to those CME courses and conferences because you're working or you have your solo practice that you have to support. And I think it's important that you're working on building your financial literacy and increasing your wealth so that way you can improve your overall well-being. So that's why we're here to help you to be able to travel and to be able to find time to rest and to reset. And building great financial background is important in doing all of those things. So thank you, Dr. Halford, for being here. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next time.